Imagine a ship nearly 263 meters long, with a displacement of over 70,000 metric tons and 9 460-millimeter guns. This isn't science fiction. This is the Yamato, the largest and most heavily armed battleship ever built. But this raises the key question: why did Japan need such a massive ship if, by the time it entered service, naval warfare was already beginning to shift from artillery duels to the dominance of aviation? To understand this, we need to go back to the 1930s. And then the story of the Yamato will turn out to be more than just the story of a giant ship. It is the story of one country's attempt to overcome the enemy's numerical superiority through engineering. In the 1930s, Japan realized that in a potential war against the United States, it would not be able to easily compete with American industry in terms of the number of ships. Therefore, the Japanese Naval Command focused not only on quantity, but also on the quality of individual combat units. The idea was relatively simple. If it was impossible to build as many large ships as a potential adversary, they could try to create ships capable of surpassing American battleships in firepower and protection. This led to the design of a new class of battleships. The Yamato was laid down on November 4, 1937, at the Naval shipyard in Kure. Its construction was kept strictly secret. The Japanese side tried to conceal the ship's actual dimensions, and in particular, its armament. Why? Because the Yamato was being built after the international restrictions on the construction of large warships established by the Washington Naval Treaty System had been imposed. Japan no longer wanted to limit itself to the previous constraints. The designers were given the opportunity to create a ship on an entirely different scale, and they took full advantage of that opportunity. But the most incredible thing wasn't the ship's size. The Yamato's main secret lay at the bow, in its 3 gigantic turrets, and each of the 9 main guns had a caliber of 460 millimeters. 460 millimeters, that's about 18.1 inches. The Yamato's main armament consisted of 9 such guns, 3 in each of the 3 turrets. These were the largest naval guns ever mounted on a battleship. But increasing the caliber wasn't enough. Each shot from such a gun required an enormous amount of energy, space, and structural strength. Therefore, the entire ship was essentially designed around its main armament. The Yamato was about 263 meters long and nearly 39 meters wide. Its full displacement upon completion was approximately 72,800 metric tons. To put this in perspective, the ship was so large that its sheer size alone posed an engineering challenge. But the Japanese designers didn't stop at firepower. They wanted the Yamato to be able to withstand hits from heavy shells. The main armor belt was approximately 410 millimeters thick. The frontal plates of the main caliber turrets were even thicker, about 650 millimeters in the most heavily protected areas, according to Japanese specifications for the class. Such armor increased the ship's weight, so a powerful propulsion system was required. 4 shafts were driven by steam turbines, providing a speed of about 27 knots. In other words, the Yamato was not merely a floating artillery battery. For its size, it remained a very fast ship. And then another important question arose. How far could it fire? The maximum firing range of the main caliber reached approximately 42 kilometers, depending on the type of ammunition and conditions. But the actual effectiveness of such a weapon depended not only on range. It was necessary to detect the enemy, determine the distance, calculate the lead, and hit a moving target. And that's where a whole different story began. The Yamato paradox is becoming increasingly apparent. Japan built a battleship designed for a massive artillery battle. But the war for which it was built was gradually turning into a war of aircraft, and the Yamato had to find its place in this new world. The Yamato was launched on August 8, 1940, and officially entered service with the Japanese Navy on December 16, 1941. This occurred just a few days after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. But contrary to popular belief, the Yamato did not become the main weapon of the war's early months. At the Battle of Midway in June 1942, the Yamato was part of the main force of the Japanese fleet, commanded by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. However, the decisive battle took place primarily between the aircraft carrier task forces. American aircraft destroyed 4 large Japanese aircraft carriers. Japanese battleships, including the Yamato, were unable to alter the outcome of the battle, and that was a crucial signal. Naval warfare was already changing. Now a ship could be enormous, superbly armored, and heavily armed. But if the enemy held air superiority, its capabilities were drastically reduced. The Yamato continued to serve as a flagship, provide escort, and participate in major operations, but its main guns rarely had the opportunity to do what they were built for. In 1944, the situation became even more dramatic. In the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the Yamato was assigned to Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita's Central Force. It was there that she first made extensive use of her main guns against American ships. At the same time, however, American aircraft attacked the Japanese force. One of the Yamato's sister ships, the Battleship Musashi, was sunk after being hit by numerous aerial bombs and torpedoes. This clearly demonstrated the fundamental problem with giant battleships. Armor could protect against many threats, but it could not replace control of the skies. The Yamato was designed as a weapon of the future. But by 1944, the future of naval warfare had already arrived. Now, Japan had one of the most powerful battleships on the planet, but the fleet's situation was growing increasingly dire. By 1945, Japan's strategic situation had deteriorated sharply. The country's industrial and naval capabilities had been severely weakened. Following the Allied landing on Okinawa, the Japanese High Command decided to launch a final major operation involving the Yamato. It was named Tengo. On April 6, 1945, the Yamato sailed from Tokuyama, along with the light cruiser Yahagi and 8 destroyers. The mission was related to the defense of Okinawa. The plan called for a voyage to the island, where the Yamato was to use its guns against Allied forces. The Americans had received advance warning of the Japanese task force's departure, thanks to radio intercepts and decrypted messages. On the morning of April 7th, U.S. carrier-based aircraft launched a massive attack, and this is where the main flaw in the Yamato concept became apparent. The ship was incredibly well protected against many types of artillery fire, but against a large number of aircraft, its capabilities were limited. The Yamato maneuvered, used its anti-aircraft artillery, and continued moving. But the attacks continued. During the battle, the ship sustained numerous hits from bombs and torpedoes. Eventually, the Yamato lost stability, capsized, and sank. This happened on April 7, 1945, approximately 4 years after she entered service. Most of the people on board perished with the ship. The Yamato no longer existed as a warship, but her story did not end there. And this brings us to the main question of our video. Was the Yamato a mistake? From a technical standpoint, it was an outstanding engineering project, but the war proved that the most powerful ship isn't necessarily the most effective weapon. The answer cannot be boiled down to a single reason. The Yamato was the result of several factors acting together. First, Japanese leadership sought to offset a potential adversary's numerical superiority with the qualitative superiority of individual ships. Second, there was a tradition of viewing a decisive naval battle as a clash between large surface fleets. Hence, the massive guns, heavy armor, and high speed. Third, Japanese designers truly created an outstanding engineering feat. The Yamato was the largest battleship of its time and possessed the most powerful main battery among battleships. But technological superiority in a single area does not guarantee victory in war. While Japan was building giant battleships, the importance of carrier-based aviation, reconnaissance, radar, submarines, and industrial production was constantly growing. After Midway, and especially by 1944 to 1945, it became increasingly clear large ships without reliable air cover were vulnerable. This is precisely why the story of the Yamato is so important. It does not illustrate a failure of engineering. It illustrates the gap between technological capabilities and the reality of war. The Yamato was not the most useless ship of its time, nor was it a wonder weapon. It was an attempt to solve a real strategic problem using a battleship of the highest order. But history solved that problem in a different way. The Yamato became a symbol of an era when size, armor, and caliber were considered the most important indicators of a warship's power. Her 9 460mm guns remain a unique engineering achievement. Her hull was enormous. Her armor was exceptionally strong. Her propulsion system allowed her to reach speeds of nearly 27 knots, but the Yamato was unable to change the course of the war. She took part in major operations, yet her potential was never realized as her designers had hoped. And therein lies the main lesson of the Yamato's history. Engineers can build the most powerful ship of their time, but war is not determined solely by how powerful a single ship is. It is determined by intelligence, aviation, logistics, industry, strategy, and the ability to adapt to change. The Yamato was the last giant of the battleship era, and its fate showed the world just how quickly that era was coming to an end. On April 7, 1945, one of the largest and most heavily armed ships in history sank. But the question that led to its creation remains relevant. What happens when a country attempts to overcome the enemy's numerical superiority by creating a weapon that surpasses everything else in scale? The story of the Yamato provides a very simple answer to this question. Sometimes the most powerful tool turns out to have been created for a war that has already changed.